And good afternoon, good morning or evening from ever around the world where you're tuning in. Welcome at COP26 in Glasgow. Welcome to this UNFCCC side event, Building Progress from Complex Ingredients, Climate, Water, Finance, with a special focus on Africa. I'm Henk Ovink, I'll be your moderator. I'm Special Envoy for International Water Affairs for the Netherlands. How can we better manage water resources, politically, technically, and financially, to face climate change? African countries are particularly vulnerable to climate change, which impacts their economies and societies, the most vulnerable first and foremost. Ensuring sustainable access to water resources is a critical challenge for the world, but definitely also for Africa. With that, we have an amazing panel group and introductions from around the world to discuss this and see how we can move that discussion towards action. And to kick us off, we have a welcome address from Secretary of State for International Trade of the United Kingdom, Anna-Marie Trevelyan. Anna-Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much to the UNFCCC, Global Water Partnership, and the World Water Council for inviting me to speak today, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person to deliver this address. Thank you as well to the former President of Tanzania, His Excellency Kikwete, and our esteemed high-level panellists, and of course, Henk Ovink, the Dutch International Water Envoy, and everyone else who has joined us here today. As the UK's international champion on adaptation and resilience for COP26, I have had the privilege of speaking to people across the world who are on the front line dealing with the impacts of climate change. Adaptation action is one of the key goals of the UK COP presidency. We know that natural disasters and increasingly unpredictable weather events are devastating lives and local communities. But what has struck me time and time again is the enterprise, the ingenuity, and the ideas that local people have to deal with these impacts. And at this critical time, we know that more needs to be done to ensure that people have the tools and the support to allow them to take further action, especially in the face of an increasingly severe and unpredictable climate. And nowhere is that more important than in Africa. Over the last 12 months, I have spoken to ministers across the continent and been fortunate enough to visit Ghana, Egypt, and Malawi recently. In Malawi, I heard about the challenges they face with water management and visited a site where planting new trees has helped to protect water resources. A new agreement between farmers in the same area has also enabled fair water sharing, which reduces local conflicts and benefits all the farmers. In Ghana, I met youth climate activists who were working on a water adaptation project which aims to help protect valuable water resources. These stories were replicated in all my visits and calls. Access to water is fundamental to so many of the development challenge countries in Africa face, and we need to do more to support them. Water use has been growing globally at more than twice the rate of population increases in the last century. The IPCC report released earlier this year rings the alarm loud and clear that climate change is causing global impacts and possibly irrevocable disasters. Droughts are already 70% more frequent, and in the next decade, intense rainfall is 50% more likely. That's why events such as this are so important. Here at COP26, the UK is pushing for bold ambition on adaptation. Last year, for example, we launched the Adaptation Action Coalition, which now has 40 members and has action on water as one of its priorities. The AAC builds on the call to action I launched with partners as UK Secretary of State for International Development in 2019. It is designed to convene governments, business, civil society and academia to learn from each other and help identify those solutions that can be scaled up. The AAC has already co-developed a water tracker in partnership with the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation to strengthen and integrate water resilience in national planning. The Water Tracker is a genuinely simple but exciting way to quickly and effectively strengthen water resilience in national climate plans. This will help turn climate commitments into effective and bankable programmes of work, making water more retail friendly. But we can't stop there. We need to see bold action on adaptation finance so that countries are able to access the funds necessary to enact the adaptation work that they know is vital. This finance needs to make it to the front line so that those who know best how to adapt are able to lead on delivering the solutions. That's why the UK is a firm supporter of the principles of locally led adaptation, to ensure that everyone on the front line of climate change, including women, girls and those marginalised groups, can take control of their own response to climate change. All of this needs strong leadership, setting policy direction and establishing the space for the different stakeholders from business and civil society to engage with policymakers in mapping out the pathway to a resilient water future, and then setting up the necessary regulatory and financial structures to enable investment from public and private sources. One example of this is the Resilient Water Accelerator work led by the Prince of Wales Sustainable Markets Initiatives and supported by WaterAid and many others, including the UK government. Another example of leadership is the 20 or so countries, companies and civil society organisations that have signed up to the Glasgow Fair Water Footprint Declaration launched yesterday by Minister Goldsmith. This new partnership is aimed at climate resilient, inclusive and sustainable development. It will help companies address the water footprint of their food, their textiles and mineral production with supportive market-based measures and stronger accountability. The aim is to make water stewardship the new business norm. Together at COP, we have the greatest chance to protect the most vulnerable people by paving a path towards a brighter, greener and more resilient world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Trevelyan, for your encouraging words in these challenging times, and also for highlighting the different initiatives the UK, together with other governments, private sector, NGOs, and the communities at risk are taking. Thank you. Next is Louis FAUCHON, President of the World Water Council. And as we all know, next year the World Water Council again will help organize the World Water Forum in Senegal in March 2022. Louis, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for participating to this COP26 side event. And my respect and gratitude to all speakers involved in this event. Dear friends of water, step by step, water is taking its full place in the consequences of climate evolutions. It is still difficult to qualify these consequences in terms of quantity and quality. But no one can confirm today that the global water cycle is deeply disturbed. We can note much more water here and much less water there. Less water for man, more water for nature, or maybe the opposite? No one can answer this question with precision. But climate is not the only threat to water. The increase of the planet population is another one. Today, more worrying. Crowding in megacities, concentration along rivers and coasts, rising standards of living, new forms of land and sea pollution are all factors to contribute to creating water shortage today that will be aggravated by the climate tomorrow. In many regions of the world, humanity is condemned to produce more water while consuming less. And by securing the resource, protecting it, but at the same time saving it and stop wasting in agriculture, of course, but also in domestic and industrial purposes. Promoting ecological use is now essential, as it is essential to share water between man and nature. sharing implies a virtuous management of water that is essential to the balance of tomorrow's world. Let us summarize today in a few words the proposals of the World Water Council developed since the COP22 in Marrakesh a few years ago. The first is to give priority to the development of non-conventional water resources, such as desalination of sea and brackish water, reuse of wastewater, and recharging of groundwater. The second is to use renewable energies, such as solar, wind, and geothermal, in order to reduce the energy cost of water resources. The third is to rethink the issue of seasonal conservation with water reservoirs. The time of heavy and aggressive dams must give way step by step to a new style of large aquatic reserves as useful to mankind as to nature. The fourth is to strengthen the three pillars of knowledge, finance, and governance, the only ones capable of allowing efficient and transparent access to water for all. The fifth is to promote a multi-sectorial approach through a five-fingers alliance, bringing together water, energy, food, health, and education. The sixth is to systematically involve the different levels of political decision-making, namely the government, the parliament, the water basin, and the local authority. The addition of their wills and skills is a main condition to really make water a political priority. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, water is politics in the noblest sense of the term. Water, consecrated as a political requirement, allows us to enforce the right to water, individual and collective right as a universal right through the constitutions of states, but also as an individual right through minimum allocations of drinking water and access to sanitation for everyone. If together, the climate community and the water community, we dare demand actions and concrete answers from the political and economic leaders of this world, then we will be able to give hope and dignity to the weakest, the poorest, and the people in need. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Loic, for your message that really is at the core of the challenges we face, but also focusing on the opportunities. Africa is calling for an international high-level panel on water investments to accelerate the mobilization of climate-resilient water investments on the continent. Only this Tuesday, November 2nd, I had the honor to host a high-level session on that Africa Investment Water Initiative. It's coming out of the high-level panel on water as one of the main drivers for water and climate action. The changes that need to take place to create conditions for high-level leadership and political commitment to create conditions for increased climate-resilient water investments and financing in Africa and sufficient water investments to allow a decent life and become resilient to climate change. That is the core central objective of this Africa Water Investment Program. Therefore, I turn to His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete, Global Water Partnership Chair for Southern Africa and former President of Tanzania. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Global Water Partnership for Southern Africa and the Africa Coordinating Unit, of which I'm chairman of the board, and on my own behalf, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, for associating our organization with this historic COP26 meeting in Glasgow, Scotland. we are particularly delighted and grateful that the subject of discussion at this sideline event is towards an international high-level panel on water investments in Africa. We in Africa can't wait to see the panel established and start working. We urgently need the panel because of our particular circumstances. 1 in 3 Africans face water insecurity. About 400 million Africans have no access to safe drinking water. And about 700 million more do not have access to good sanitation. The economic and service sectors do not get the water they need for optimal performance. That's impeding socio-economic growth and development on the continent. You may recall in 2016, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, and the then President of the World Bank, Dr. Jim Kim, established a high-level panel on water. In its report in 2018, the panel recommended the establishment of a water investment program for Africa. In the pursuit of that recommendation, in 2019, the African Ministers' Council on Water directed that the Africa Water Investment Program be conceived. Subsequently, the African Ministers' Council on Water Secretariat teamed up with the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, the African Development Bank, the Global Partnership for the Global Water Partnership for Southern Africa, and others to undertake the work of conceiving and developing the Africa Water Investment Program. This work was successfully concluded, and in February 2021, the Assembly of African Heads of State and Government of the African Union endorsed the Africa Water Investment Program as part of the African Union's Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, huge sums of money are required to implement the Africa Water Investment Program. The African Ministers' Council on Water estimates that about $30 billion would be required to be invested annually to be able to meet SDG 6 targets on water and sanitation in Africa by 2030. On its part, the African Development Bank estimates that $64 billion would need to be invested annually to meet the 2025 Africa Water Vision for water security for all. Currently, water investments in Africa stands at between $10 and $19 billion, thus leaving a huge investment gap to be filled, whichever estimates one uses. It is with the desire to build the capacity to mobilize increased investments and financing to implement the Africa Water Investment Program and close the investment gaps that the African Ministers' Council on Water resolved to establish the International High-Level Panel on Water Investments in Africa. I am delighted to inform this August Assembly that the Global Water Partnership for Africa has joined hands with the African Ministerial Council on Water, AUDA NEPAD, African Development Bank, UNICEF, UNDP, and the Global Center for Adaptation to be conveners of the high-level panel. Work of appointing persons to be members of the panel is ongoing. Soon, we'll have the high-level panel on water investments in Africa up and running. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Water Investment Program is designed to address the obstacles to investments and financing for climate-resilient water investments in Africa. As we all know, the biggest impacts of climate change are water-related. Perhaps nowhere is this more pronounced than in Africa, where even in the 2021 report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it is stated that the rate of temperature increase in Africa is to be faster than the global average. As a result, there is increased frequency and intensity of heavy precipitation in some parts of Africa, and there is recurrent periods of long droughts in many parts of our dear continent. At the center, or at the receiving end of this crisis, is the African farmer. With over 90%, 95% of African food production being rain-fed, Africa's subsistence farmers are among the most affected by climate change. As we assemble at COP26, it is of utmost urgency that increased attention is paid to adaptation interventions and investments related to water retention, storage, rainwater harvesting, water source protection, and water infrastructure. We have also been working with the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, African Ministers' Council on Water, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, the African Development Bank, OECD, UNICEF, the World Bank, and other partners to develop a first-of-its-kind Africa Water Investment Scorecard. The Africa Water Investment Scorecard will support countries to track progress, set benchmarks, identify bottlenecks, and take action to meet the investment needs to achieve SDG 6 targets on water and sanitation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Water Investment Scorecard is still under development. Once completed, it is going to be presented regularly to African heads of state and government to enable them to know what is happening in the water sector in their respective countries. It will serve as an important guide for their appropriate decisions and action. The scorecard also will support the work of the International High-Level Panel on Water Investments for Africa to track progress in implementation of the Africa Water Investment Program. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we believe the scorecard will enhance mutual accountability for results in the mobilization of water investments and use, and in peer review mechanisms at continental, regional, national, subnational, and even community levels. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I'd like to use this opportunity to call on international leaders assembled at COP26 to support the Africa Water Investment Program, to support the Africa Water Investment Scorecard, and the formal establishment of the International High-Level Panel on Water Investments for Africa. With those many words, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency Kikwete, for your wise words, but also, of course, for your leadership on water in Africa and beyond. Water is the social and economic factor that gets hit earliest and hardest by climate change. We all know this. This is why we are here. Climate change manifests differently across Africa. More water abundance, more extremes, more scarcity, a combination of more floods and more droughts, and so forth. It triggers food insecurity, tensions between more or less resilient groups, social disruption, and development reversal. Depending on policy responses and responses on the ground, this may spill over into tensions, into conflict, displacement, migration, water and climate as root causes for those conflicts and migrations. Africa's specific in this sense. Over 60% of African nations have least developed country status. And least developed also implies least fiscal space to finance climate change adaptation in water resource management. It's urbanizing rapidly at a rate of 40% now, following trajectory of other continents with some delay. And to date, productivity gains of urbanization are lower in Africa than in any other continent. Again, limiting the space to finance climate change adaptation in water resource management. Against these odds, how can Africa adapt its water resource management, its urban, agriculture, energy, industry developments, and sustain its nature in a way that promotes greener, more inclusive and more resilient outcomes, and both rural, in some countries over 80% of the population, and in cities? What mix of small and large-scale water resource management adaptation investments can make society more resilient? And what financing mix, public, private, concessional, commercial, does that require? Do we see a convergence on adaptation policy between government and lenders, and demand size, citizens and entrepreneurs? And how to strike a balance between affordability with low-tech solutions that are more affordable but can be less efficient than high-tech, and scalability, where affordable solutions can become more inclusive with the capacity to scale. Many questions to focus on in discussion with an amazing panel. With me here on stage, welcome Minister of Forestry and Natural Resources of Malawi, Nancy Tembo. Thank you for joining us. And then remote, online, I'm very honored to have Seringa Mobaya THIAM, Minister of Water and Sanitation from Senegal, Prime Nagabonzia, Director General of Rwanda Water Resources Board, and Jennifer Zara, the Water Director for the Water Global Practice of the World Bank. Welcome online. I actually have no clue where you are, but I assume you are there. Thanks so much for joining. Let's start with you, Minister Tembo. And thanks again for being with me, because it really makes a good connection. Malawi has a lower than average degree of urbanization, less than 20% of population in cities. 80% of your population faces rural adaptation challenges. And climate change projections point towards shorter rainy seasons, more drought, increased cyclone risk. Many questions I can ask, but can you tell us perhaps a bit on how the water tracker is helping Malawi integrate water risks into its national adaptation plan, and perhaps expand a bit on the Adaptation Action Coalition, perhaps also in its political importance towards the UN conference in 2023, Minister?
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be amongst these eminent persons here. Let me start by saying that water is life. We all know water is life. We don't need to even say it. But we need to say it because it is a resource that is fast disappearing, not disappearing, but maybe the amount of water, fresh water that we require is not the way it used to be in the past. And there is a need for us to safeguard this resource, which is the very basis of life. What the water tracker does is it raises the issue of making the use of water more efficient. It brings to the fore the need for governments to ensure that they protect it. And it helps build adaptation and resilience. Communities where the use of the water tracker is being implemented, we have noted, for example, in the southern part of Malawi, the tea industry is using the water tracker to manage its water, monitor its water, make sure they're recycling its water. make sure no drop of water is being lost. Because that's what we need to do. And governments have a role to ensure that whatever water we are using is used to the maximum and is protected. We should depollute our water. We should put in place policies that ensure that our water is not polluted. And we in Malawi, we are trying our best. One of the biggest polluters of our water bodies is plastic. And we have put in place a law that bans especially the very non-usable plastic. We have banned that. And we have sensitized communities that this is bad for them. This will destroy life, and it destroys life. So that is something that we're doing. Regarding the coalition, and as we move to 2023, I think the build-up will raise more awareness. Just like there was a build-up to COP26, the build-up to the 2023 will raise awareness, and I think in the process, make governments more aware of what they need to do in their countries. Like was said earlier on, that water is a political resource. And so we need political leadership in the management of water. Water can cause conflict. Water can bring disharmony in a country. So the way we manage water, and if we use this water tracker, it is a tool that should help governments, should help communities ensure that whatever little we have is protected, whatever little we have is used efficiently.
Thank you, Minister. That's really clear on the point, also on the role of government, what the tracker does, but it also really resonates to the high-level panel on water work on valuing water, protecting that natural resource, but also capacitating communities, governments, and across, and finding opportunities for allocating finance. I'll get back to you later, but thanks so much for also setting the stage for this discussion. Minister Seringa Mbaya THIAM, are you with us from Senegal? I guess not. Yeah? Yes, Minister. I hope you can hear me.
It's okay now. Minister Cham, I'm here.
Fantastic, Minister THIAM. Thank you for joining. Senegal is ahead of Africa's urbanization curve. Almost 50% of the population of your population live in cities. Climate change projections point toward more, and I can even see you, Minister. Thanks so much for joining. Climate change projections point toward more droughts, more scarcity, and more coastal erosions too. Couple of questions for you, but I'll take, to get us started from the Senegal perspective. What are your main financing challenges in adapting in this adaptation curve to a new water future? And is lack of finance the problem, or a lack of well-structured adaptation investment opportunities? So let's focus here on adaptation and finance first. Can you expand a bit from Senegal's perspective?
Okay, thank you very much. I am connected with the name of Katim Keras from World Water Council, but I don't want to have a misunderstanding, but I'm going to speak in French. I don't know if you have translation.
No, we don't. Although I understand French, but we don't have translation, but if this is the case. Yeah.
Okay, but I'm going to speak in French.
Yeah. I'll do my best.
Okay. Thank you very much all. And my friend Zara, Jennifer, ok. La population du Sénégal est une population qui augmente rapidement, avec une concentration plus poussée de la population dans les grandes villes. Lorsqu'on prend la région de Dakar, qui abrite la capitale, près de 96% de la population vit dans le milieu urbain. Et cette situation pose des problèmes de déconcentration et de décentralisation des projets, des programmes, afin de stopper la venue des populations rurales vers les villes. Cette situation pose aussi le problème de l'accès à l'eau et en même temps de la gestion quotidienne des questions d'inondation. Lorsqu'on sait que la région de Dakar et les régions environnantes concentrent 80% de la consommation d'eau potable du Sénégal, alors que cette eau doit venir de 250 km de Dakar à partir d'un lac. Cette question pose plusieurs défis. Il y a d'abord le défi de la faiblesse des moyens de l'État pour faire face aux besoins en eau, en même temps aux besoins en éducation, aux besoins en santé, en infrastructure. Faiblesse des moyens qui ne permet pas de financer le gap pour un accès total à l'eau et à l'assainissement à l'horizon des OMD, des ODD du moins. Le coût relativement élevé du transfert d'eau, si l'on sait que les ressources sont limitées en ville et peuvent être polluées. Le coût élevé de l'innovation pour la valorisation des ressources. Nous nous acheminons vers une usine de dessalement à Dakar pour diversifier les sources d'approvisionnement en eau, mais en même temps pour atténuer les risques de rupture de l'alimentation qui vient de 250 km de Dakar, et le coût du renforcement de capacité des acteurs sur ces nouvelles technologies. Nous faisons face aussi au surcoût de l'assainissement lié à une urbanisation mal planifiée, mal maîtrisée, où on est dans un contexte de rattrapage avec des inondations que nous connaissons de plus en plus au niveau de Dakar. Donc, ce que nous constatons, c'est qu'il y a un déficit de la prise en charge de la problématique de l'eau et de l'assainissement dans les guichets de financement vert. Alors qu'il doit y avoir des problèmes, des projets d'eau et d'assainissement qui doivent être éligibles au guichet de financement vert. Lorsque un pays comme le Sénégal, nous nous acheminons et nous travaillons à avoir une économie circulaire de l'eau, où les eaux usées ne sont pas des déchets, mais sont considérées comme des ressources, nous pensons que ce type de projet doit être éligible au financement vert. Le secteur de l'eau aussi, à la différence du secteur de l'électricité dans nos pays, a encore un accès limité au partenariat public-privé. Et nous pensons que le partenariat public-privé, pour lequel nous avons aujourd'hui des propositions, devrait être encouragé pour le financement des projets d'eau et d'assainissement. Voilà, dans un premier temps, les quelques éléments de réponse que je voudrais donner. Merci.
Thank you, Minister. A clear case for financing water through climate finance. And indeed, the sanitation space is the space where we mitigate climate, mitigate risk, but also work on climate mitigation. Also clear on the challenges Senegal is facing. I heard you say 80% of all water of Senegal is consumed in Dakar, but it comes many kilometers away. So the need is massive and finance is definitely insufficient. So with that, unlocking finance, public and private, for water across the board projects, water provision, WASH, but also resiliency is of critical importance, and ensuring that climate finance can flow to water sector projects is their part of the solution. Thanks very much for the perspective of Senegal. Then I go to Rwanda. Prime Ngabonziza, Director General of the Rwanda Water Resources Board. I hope I pronounce your name right. Less than 20% urbanized at present, but rapid urbanization is foreseen. Densely populated, with small land holdings, limited investment capacity among farmers. And recent analysis of the World Resources Group 2030 suggests water claims for development may exceed water availability. And with climate change, well, this will further exacerbate scarcity. More intense rainfall, but reduced recharge. Some questions for you. What are your main water resource management adaptation investments concern? Are they urban, rural, or both? And do you also recognize the affordability and scalability dilemma? And how do you navigate this? And perhaps some obstacles on mobilizing adaptation finance in the context of Rwanda. The floor is yours, if you are online. Oh, please turn your camera on. That is what I have to ask. Thank you. Can you?
Thank you very much. I am muted.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, but we can't see you. Can you turn your camera on?
Thank you very much for this good and unique opportunity in this important event of COP26. This is, as you see,
I'm not sure what happened, but dear Prime Ngabonziza, are you still with us? No?
Hello?
Yes, there you are. Please try again.
Are you hearing me? Okay, I was saying that, as I said, Rwanda is known as the country of 1,000 hills. I think many of people have learned about Rwanda. Its altitude value between 1,000 meters.
I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry, dear Prime. You're cut off again. But, let's go to Jennifer Zara, Global Director for Water for the World Bank first. I guess, Jennifer, are you with us?
Hello, Hank. Yes, I am here.
Oh, amazing. Great to hear your voice. Perhaps if you, there you are, I can even see you. That's amazing. Thanks so much for joining, Jennifer. It's great to see you and have you virtually here in Glasgow. Couple of questions also for you. You're so much engaged in Africa, of course. The World Bank policy favors green, resilient, inclusive development, this grit lending. Policy is one thing, well, and you are definitely a World Bank employee director on the ground, and you've been on the ground across the world, you know. So policy is one, but implementation is another. What can the World Bank do perhaps differently to help partner countries prioritize water in their national planning and create better conditions for investment by the private sector? Do you see convergence between your policy, this grid policy, and client demands? And how does that work? Eh? How can we overcome that? And the second part of my question would be on scalability and affordability for adaptation lending in the portfolio of water resource management. But first, this convergence between policy and climate demand from a grid perspective.
So thank you, Hank. It's wonderful to be here and to share this platform with our honorable ministers. Pleasure to see you again, Minister THIAM. And I also really want to thank all of you for continuing to maintain the water in the COP. We always know that, those of you who are in Glasgow, thank you very much. An honorable minister from Malawi too, so important to make sure that water is present in all these climate conversations. And I'm absolutely delighted to hear that this is a continuation of the results of the high-level panel on water for the Africa Finance Facility. And that was something we discussed in 2018. It's just wonderful to see that move ahead. And we look forward to supporting that. Hank, just to respond to your question, we cannot agree more how important it is to find the finance and the implementation for investments in water and the importance of water and national planning. And I want to make 3 points. The first one is how important it is to make the case to invest in water and adaptation and mitigation with not the ministers of water, but with the ministers of finance. The second one is how do we shape an agenda, as Minister THIAM mentioned, that both brings in the SDGs and the climate imperatives together. And of course, the third then is how do you move into a financing framework and make bankable green projects too that can attract green finance. And so on the first point about making the case, and going back to your question about what the bank does on the green, resilient, inclusive development, the grid approach, as part of this, we've just launched, and in support of our commitment to putting 50% of our finance into the climate agenda, support to countries to create a climate and development report. They're called Country Climate and Development Report. We believe countries have to be out in front, and how do they balance their development objectives with their climate objectives? And how to help identify and prioritize investments that suit their needs and help them in this critical transition. And we understand that climate change is a global challenge, but the battle will be won or lost in individual countries. The actions countries take and the policies they put in place now hold the key to low carbon resilient growth for the future. So these CCDRs, which are providing evidence, really what's important here is how they can come up afterwards with a bankable set of projects that lending institutions and the private sector can help to support government to guide the investments. Let's just give an example in Morocco. We understand that climate change is significantly impacting the availability of water resources. And one of the central pillars of Morocco's NDCs, as well as the CTR, is around water scarcity. And strong analytical work that looks at the impacts of water scarcity on economic growth, employment, trade, and of course, the social impact. In Rwanda, and I'm happy to see that Prime is there with this camera on, with the partnership that you mentioned with the 2030 Water Resources Group, it's also looking at the analytical work that looks at the risks of water to the development objectives of Rwanda. The second message I want to give, though, is how important it is for us to talk about water, not just because of adaptation, but mitigation. Mitigation is what really the COP is about. It's about getting countries to commit to mitigation goals. And we were delighted last week or this week to hear 100 heads of state to make a commitment on methane. And methane is really, really important to the water sector and a huge opportunity for us to reduce methane emissions in the water sector in 2 specific ways. One of them is definitely in better management of irrigation water. We understand that rice, mismanagement of water and rice and excessive flooding is responsible for 10% of the methane emissions. So here we have a win-win, use water more efficiently and reduce methane. So that's an important sector for us. And the second one, and is equally, maybe even more important, is on the issue of wastewater, where we see that up to 10% of methane emissions is now being emitted by both treated and untreated waste. And this is very, very important for us also to help make up the deficit in sanitation. And as Minister THIAM mentioned, the increasing population coming into Dakar, the pressures that there are both on water and the need to deliver sanitation is an excellent example how Senegal is really progressing in this space, the circular economy approaches, how in Dakar resources are now recovered from wastewater and fecal sludge under these circular economy principles. And we want to look at wastewater as a resource that can create fertilizer, maybe it can create carbon credits, it can create energy, and it can create new water. So both the second message is, if we want to invest more, let's look at both adaptation as well as mitigation and be able to capture much more of the climate finance around mitigation. And then finally, of course, the last point is about how do you raise money for this, right? And again, it comes back to the need to having very clear bankable projects, aligning ourselves around government to look at portfolios of investment, see what can be public, what can be private, and what could be PPP. So let me stop there, and I thank you again for inviting me to this panel.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. As always, perfectly clear. And also, thanks so much for, again, highlighting the importance of focusing on mitigation from the water space. Indeed, the methane deal, again, encourages countries to also focus on water as a way to mitigate climate change. 1.5 degree to that matter is not only agreed upon in Paris 6 years ago, it also is actually our best adaptation measure ever. And water can really contribute to this mitigation target. Thanks so much also for highlighting some of the examples you're, of course, involved in Africa. And then circular economy, the systems approach across, you could say, life cycles and SDGs of critical importance. I just heard from our technical support team that you're back with us, Prime Nagabonziza. Are you there?
Now it's okay. Yes, I am.
Perfect. Floor is yours. Ah, we can even see you. Amazing. Wow. Okay.
Sometimes,
yeah, your floor is yours.
Sometimes the technology is not on our side.
Right. Go.
Thank you very much for this good opportunity to talk about a little about Rwanda. As you know, Rwanda is located in East Africa with an altitude ranging between 1,000 to 4.5 thousand, with square kilometers less to 27 square kilometers. As you know, our country is a mountainous country with 70% of our land are presenting a slope from 10%, and this is coupled with a rainfall ranging from 700 millimeter to 1,006 millimeter. In terms of water resource in Rwanda, Rwanda has a dense hydraulic network consisting on a marshland with 10% of our total area, with a river and the lakes ranging to 5% of our total area, and a network of 6,000 kilometers of length of our rivers. This is bring to say that more than 90% of our water resource in Rwanda is internally generated, and the inflow from other countries is relatively very, very small. All the above factors combined make Rwanda very much vulnerable to climate change, with a high soil rate because of this steepy soil, with a frequent and damaging flood in the hilly part of the country. Concerning for the climate and water resources related challenges, analysis of rainfall trends show that rain seasons are tending to become shorter with a high intensity due to the climate change effect. This tendency has led to decreases in agricultural productivity and events such as a drought in dry area and the flood or landslide in area experiencing heavy rain. There's a heavy rain coupled with a loss of ecosystem services resulting from deforestation and the poor agricultural practices have resulted in soil erosion, rockfall, landslide, and the flood, which destroy crops, house, and sometimes infrastructure and human and animal losses. Coming to what you was asking me about what are our main water resource adaptation investment concern, water resource management adaptation investment concerns for Rwanda are both for rural and urban area. However, with different type of activity depending on the challenges to be addressed. In urban area, our focus is mainly on flood control and adapting infrastructure to climate change. In rural area, the challenge differ from the urban, where the adaptation response focus mainly on catchment restoration with some flood control measures, especially in hilly parts of the country, such as in Volcano region and located in northwest part of Rwanda. Our catchment restoration initiative are always accompanied with supporting measures aimed at building the capacity of rural community composed by primarily of farmers to cope with climate change impact. For those, there is that myth that the most affordable is hardly scaled up. However, in our case, we have learned that technically and financially affordable option can be scaled up when the beneficiaries are fully engaged in the entire process, from the planning to the implementation and the monitoring. For example, we have an experience of an approach called the community approach, where in our catchment restoration initiative, we have adopted that approach whereby the local community participate in decision-making on the activity to be implemented, and they are also associated in the implementation for the sustainability of different initiatives implemented in climate change resiliency adaptation. With the community, we developed what we call the village land use action plan. The population helps to implement. This has proven to be very efficient in promoting sustainability, also supporting affordability, and ultimately helping to scale up their intervention. Regarding the main obstacle we face in mobilizing adaptation financing, generally, there are not many technical obstacles related to mobilizing adaptation financing. However, the length process may lead to delay the response, while many climate impacts require immediate response, and when not addressed on time, they tend to escalate to level where it is quite very difficult to find appropriate response. At the country level, many actors are affected and have various needs for adaptation investment. There's a competing needs in many cases fail to raise the necessary funding for investment when they are confronting with a limited financial capacity in the country. That is when external financing is much needed to support and complement national initiative. Sometimes Rwanda lack the necessary knowledge and the skills, the requirement and the process of financing institution, therefore making the proposal for funding not always eligible while they are responding to real issue, and the proposed measures are bringing tangible solution. Dear audience, you can say that to overcome those climate change impact or issues, the government of Rwanda placed the Rwanda Water Resource Board under the Prime Minister Office with the logic and the purpose of recognizing the cross-cutting role of water resource for sustainable development of our country. Because in Rwanda's national strategy for transformation with a period of 7 years ending in 2024, 80% of the outcome impact or are impacted by water. With this ambitious development target combined with our Vision 2050 and the other strategy, it was recognized that water resource management have to play a central role for the country to achieve our ambitious vision and the target. Dear audience, dear participants, this could be achieved this could not be achieved without a mechanism or institution to coordinate all effort. To ensure appropriate response to challenges brought by climate change, the work of Rwanda Water Resource Board focuses on the following area. First, it is knowledge management for better planning for current and the future water demand, availability and the supply, catchment restoration to cope with soil erosion and increase land productivity, flood management to build the resilience to water-related disaster, regulation of water use and the users to ensure water use efficiency and the good water quality, and also to make sure water storage development to increase the water availability as we are the trend of our population growth is showing that in 2050, the population of Rwanda will be around 22 million of people, where the government of Rwanda is committed to satisfy in quality and the quantity of potable enough water. Lastly, as we have we are with the other country, between other country, Rwanda have a transboundary water resource where we share with the country in our region. Rwanda cooperate with other countries, especially in the regional and the integrated management of transboundary water resource. We are a part of regional and the international organization such as Nile Basin Initiative, Lake Victoria Basin Commission, Lake Kivu, and the Rusizi River Basin, whereby joint planning and monitoring of our shared resource are coordinated, but also joint projects are being or have been developed to share benefit and build resiliency of our community. Dear audience, I thank you for this opportunity and also for your time.
Thanks very much, Prime. Thanks for your comprehensive overview on Rwanda's challenges, but also focusing on showcasing the focus you have, knowledge, regulation, and so forth. Also, what is critically important from what you said and came back to where you started in the beginning is this transboundary water issue. Collaboration across borders is of critical importance if we want to safeguard the water future for all. And this is true for our rivers, but also for our aquifers. Taking care of our natural resource, water, demands a collaboration not only across sectors in our cities and societies, but definitely also across continents. Having 4 minutes on the clock of this amazing panel, I could ask you many questions, but I only will ask you one. Of course, we know and we see through the examples everybody brought forward that change has been done on the ground. This is where it matters. That on-the-ground change can only be done by partnerships across every level of society, and then we touch upon these complex issues also across borders. At the same time, we have this higher level of commitment coming from a high-level panel on water in 2018, now a high-level panel on water investments for Africa, leading towards 2023, the first United Nations Water Conference since 1977, the second in the history of the UN. How can we match those worlds of United Nations conversations on a global level and the action needed on the ground, the change needed on the ground? What would you put on the agenda for 2023? That is my question. And first, Minister Tembo, you're with me. What would be the thing you want to put on the agenda for 2023?
Well, first would be to accelerate action. We have so much in place that needs to be done, but are we doing at the right pace? Is there financing, adequate financing, and is this financing accessible? Can we do something to speed up access to this financing so that countries are able either to build infrastructure or to embed their programs within their plans, but doing it in a more efficient way. And I think facilities, financing is key to countries to do that.
Critical, important, accelerate action, put that on the agenda towards 2023 to get to a global commitment on the adequate, the amount of finance, but also the accessibility of that and speeding up that accessibility. Yes. Clear point. Thanks very much. Minister THIAM from Senegal, what would you put on the agenda for 2023?
Le Sénégal va accueillir du 21 au 26 mars 2022 le 9e Forum mondial de l'eau, dont le thème est la sécurité de l'eau pour la paix et le développement. Les 3 termes sont importants, le terme de sécurité, le terme de paix et le terme de développement. D'abord, la question des eaux transfrontalières est une question sur laquelle le Sénégal a de l'expérience pour être membre d'un pays, pour être un pays membre de l'Organisation pour la mise en valeur du fleuve Sénégal, cité en exemple. Pour conclure, je dirais qu'on souhaite que la communauté mondiale de l'eau participe au Forum de Dakar et qu'ensemble, le thème qui est traité permette de sortir des conclusions qui seront des contributions de la communauté internationale pour cette conférence de 2023 des Nations Unies sur l'eau.
Thank you, Minister. Clear, the nexus of security, peace and development, also through the World Water Forum being hosted by Senegal next March, and this issue of transboundary water, making sure that transboundary water is positioned in 2023. Not easy, but it's part of the resolution, so we will make sure we find enough space to discuss these hot topics on water. Director General Nagabonziza, what would you put on the agenda from the Rwanda perspective in 2023? What would you put on the agenda?
Thank you very much for this good question. As I said in my talk, I am trying to summarize regarding based on priority. As I said in my talk, our country is a hilly country with a huge population density in Africa, 500 people per square kilometers. This come to tell us that we are, the first is soil erosion control through catchment restoration, because until now, our country, around 70% of our population are depending on agriculture, are depending on rainfall, meaning that many efforts should be focused on soil erosion control. This comes with the involvement with the private sector partnership. We are already aware that the government itself, it can't realize his ambitious target, his ambitious vision without the involvement of private sector. This is one of what I can say, one of the priority, and this I am appreciating the support from World Bank. The other thing, it is to work with the local population, the sustainability of what we are doing, the sustainability of what we are planning, what we are undertaking, without the real involvement our population through the approach of payment ecosystem services, through enterprise partnership initiative, which is being undertaken in Rwanda and which is showing a good result. This should be one of pillars for to overcome and to build resiliency with our population to climate change. The other thing is to increase the investment. The investment for to increase inequality and in quantity our water storage. Our target is for 2024 is Rwanda should have access to potable water. This means that for next year, 2023, we should increase for water storage for to bring our population to a clean water, and also as we are relying for electricity, for hydropower, this means we should increase our investment in water storage for electricity generation. I thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Director General Negabonzozia. Systems approach, incorporating also agriculture, soil erosion, public-private partnerships, and these local perspectives, next to what Minister Tembo already said, the financing part. And then last, but definitely not least, Jennifer, if you look towards 2023, you have experience yourself with the high-level panel on water and how it can be connected or disconnected from the on-the-ground needs. What would you put from the World Bank's perspective on the agenda for 2023?
So thank you, Hank. And just very, very quickly, I think what we need to do in the water community for 2023 is talk to people outside of water. We need to bring in our community from energy, from agriculture, from urban, the industrial sector, the big water users of the private sector. And we need all of them around the table because they're all using water and we need to solve all this together. So I'm really looking forward to the World Water Forum in Dakar and the lead up to the 2023 UN Water Conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jennifer, and very clear, we have to put water on the agenda of all the other sectors across the world and not echo more water, but echo more energy water, agriculture water, climate water, cities in water, peace and security in water, through the lens of the other sectors, through the lens of the other silos, through the lens of the other organizations. With that, time is definitely up. I want to end this panel. It's been inspiring to hear many stories from Africa, from across, on the issues of water. Not only the challenges were surfaced from Malawi, Senegal, Rwanda, and also the experience of the World Bank. Hearing about Senegal's World Water Forum from FAUCHON, and of course, kicking us off at the start, Secretary of State for International Trade, Ms. Trevelyan. And of course, the inspiring words of His Excellency Kikwete, Global Water Partnership's chair for Southern Africa and former president of Tanzania, kicking us off. It's been an amazing panel. Thank you very much, Nancy Tembo, Ministry of Malawi, Minister THIAM from Senegal, Director General Nagabonziza from Rwanda, and Jennifer Zara, Global Director for Water for the World Bank. Thanks, Global Water Partnership, for bringing us together again on water and climate. I really look forward to expand this conversation towards COP in Africa, Egypt, next year, and of course, the United Nations 2023 Water Conference in 2023. Thank you.